The royalty in the Ubera possess the special ability to control souls. The Millennia and Grand Duke family are the respectable and noble humans who jointly serve as the head of the empire. Millennia lights up the world with warm sunshine, and Fred has the power of darkness to call the night. A young boy follows his sister, Princess Dorothea. He displays a keen interest in her activities. He appears to be really fond of her, unlike his sister Dorothea Millennia, who is annoyed by her doltish brother Raymond, who's the crown prince of the Ubera Empire. Her hate for him grows stronger with each passing day. Dorothea recalls her past life where she took over the throne by killing her brother and became a tyrant. But things began to go sour for her as her faith as a tyrant led to her downfall and destruction. The man she loved died because of her. The people started harboring fear and hate for her and named her a tyrant. The allies she trusted and shared her wealth with used that wealth to execute her. In this life, she learned her lesson and took a vow to not commit any evil and live like a reasonable person. Dorothea takes her first step to live like a reasonable person by deciding not to kill the crown prince in this life. Raymond suddenly hugs her from behind, startling her. He notices her studying and begins to praise her for being a genius, making her regret her lifetime decisions, not understanding why his sister spends so much time reading difficult historical books. He informs her that he's reading a historical book too, but can never match his sister's intelligence. He tries to persuade her to play with him, but she rejects the idea. The royal nanny intervenes between Ray and Dorothea so an argument does not occur between them. She notices Dorothea reading a history book about the empire. The nanny talks about a historical fact but mentions the wrong date as to when the event occurred. Dorothea corrects her. Nanny and Ray were amazed at her brilliance and decided that the Emperor His Highness Karnan Millennia deserves to know of such progress. Dorothea regrets and wishes she would have stayed quiet. Dorothea's thoughts often drifted to her distant and strained relationship with her father, the Emperor, which had begun after her mother, Queen Alice's death during her birth, causing the Emperor to harbor resentment towards her for taking her mother's life. Despite her efforts to win his favor through intelligence and various talents, his affection was reserved solely for her younger brother, the Crown Prince, growing her resentment towards him. As Nanny suggested they take a walk in her late mother's garden, a serene place dedicated to Queen Alice's memory, she suddenly bumps into someone. To her surprise, it's the Emperor, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere. Dorothea, desperate for some communication to break the awkward silence, the Emperor gazes at her angrily and demands to know who dare to come into Alice's garden. The nanny intervenes and introduces the princess to His Majesty, who finds it unbelievable. Dorothea isn't pleased with her father's response. During their meeting, the Emperor questioned Dorothea's actions and found her initial silence rude. The nanny intervened by praising Dorothea's qualities and subtly suggesting she display royal etiquette. Dorothea understands what the nanny is signaling at and takes a bow. He asks his daughter how old is she. She replies she's just 8 years old. He is curious to know what's so special about her for the nanny to praise her like that, but she accuses the nanny of exaggeration and states that she has nothing special. The nanny intervenes and informs the Majesty that the princess is just being humble. He inquires about the royal etiquettes from her, but she refuses to give an answer, stating that His Majesty knows better. This leads to a heated argument between father and daughter. Dorothea taunts him that he was so busy that he couldn't come and take a look at her when she was born, so she's just saving his time because he might be busy. His Majesty realizes Nanny isn't entirely wrong about her. Out of the blue, His Highness unexpectedly inquires about Dorothea's desires, a rare occurrence as she couldn't recall him ever showing interest in her life. She starts to become suspicious and questions his true intentions behind this sudden inquiry. Although such a gesture is typically meant to bring joy, it fails to brighten her mood. To maintain politeness, she responds by requesting a unique wine to be crafted in her name. This unexpected request angers His Highness. Given Dorothea's age, she shouldn't be asking for something like that. He holds the nanny accountable, but Dorothea swiftly explains that she came across the idea in one of her complex books and is genuinely eager to try it. His Highness is genuinely astonished by the idea of a child delving into such complex literature. Nonetheless, he astounds Dorothea by granting her request, albeit under one condition. She must ensure there are no mistakes or the nanny will face punishment in her place. He earnestly advises her to meticulously study and excel in her royal etiquette, stressing its significance for her future. After some time has passed since the garden incident, the Emperor still hasn't visited Dorothea again. The nanny, feeling the need to explain his absence, cites his busy schedule, but Dorothea dismisses her excuses. She believes that encountering the Emperor would only worsen her mood, and since she has resolved to live a virtuous life, she aims to avoid situations that might make her uncomfortable. Poor Dorothea wonders how she is hurting alone and waiting alone, and believes she should just live in peace and let things happen naturally. Shortly after, Prince Ray arrives with a cheerful smile, inquiring about his sister's whereabouts. Dorothea, however, signals the nanny not to reveal her location and goes into hiding. Ray's disappointment stems from his desire to showcase a unique family skill, the Spirit of Light, which is the Millennia family's ability to simulate a sunrise, although it has significantly weakened. Dorothea dismisses it as an ancient legend, but a thought nags at her, considering whether her past life's experiences are somehow linked to the legend. Ray leaves with a heavy heart, disappointed that he couldn't introduce Dorothea to his friends. Meanwhile, Dorothea is deep in thought, strategizing her escape from the nanny and her brother. However, her plans are abruptly disrupted when a door swings open unexpectedly, taking her by surprise and sending her to the ground. In a state of shock, she looks up and finds herself face to face with the love of her life, the very person whose presence had played a significant role in her downfall in her previous life. Theon quickly lowers himself to check on Dorothea's well-being, noticing dirt on her clothes. He apologizes for not paying closer attention and offers his napkin to help clean her. As he kneels beside her, he scans the surroundings, searching for someone to assist, but finds no one around. In a moment of confusion, Dorothea inadvertently expresses how much she misses Theon. He looks at her in surprise, asking if they've met before. Overwhelmed by emotions, Dorothea bursts into tears as she attempts to explain further, but Theon implores her not to cry, concerned about her eyes swelling. Dorothea gazes at the man she loved in her past life, a man who once despised and abandoned her. Now, seeing him well in her new life brings her a sense of contentment. However, Ray enters the scene and finds his sister on the ground. Ignoring Dorothea's attempts to reassure him, he charges angrily at Theon, demanding to know why he made his sister cry. Ray regards Theon with disappointment, not expecting his friend to be the cause of his sister's distress. In a quick effort to protect Theon, Dorothea fabricates a lie about her injury. Ray, somewhat gullibly, falls for her story and checks once more to ensure she's fine. Theon is taken aback by Dorothea's unexpected gesture to cover for him. Ray, realizing the misunderstanding, returns to Theon and apologizes for the confusion the situation caused. He then proceeds to officially introduce his new friend Theon to Princess Dorothea. Theon courteously bows and offers his apologies for the initial incident. As Dorothea gazes at Theon, she reflects on her past life and hopes that her new life might lead to a change in their relationship. However, her thoughts are interrupted by the voice of a little girl. Dorothea quickly recognizes the voice as belonging to Julia, Theon's first and last love. A quick flashback reminds Dorothea of her former life, where her marriage to Theon had been arranged through a family contract. However, the only person Theon truly loved was Julia, with whom he had shared a special bond since childhood. Despite Dorothea's relentless efforts to win a place in Theon's heart, her love for him remained unrequited. Even after their marriage, Theon continued to send love letters to Julia. Fueled by jealousy and anger, Dorothea wished for Julia's death, and, in a fit of rage, sent a servant to commit the murder. She felt a sense of satisfaction after Julia's death, believing that Theon would finally turn to her. Instead, Theon resented her and eventually chose to end his own life. Dorothea came to realize that her selfish love had led to his death and her own downfall. Raymond calls out to Julia as he introduces her to his sister, and Dorothea manages to offer a polite greeting to Julia. She wonders if Julia and Theon will find their way back to each other in her new life. However, Dorothea soon excuses herself, retreating to her room. Ray attempts to persuade her to stay and play with them, but she runs away, feeling unworthy of their company due to her actions in her previous life, when her nanny inquires about her feelings. Dorothea uses tiredness as an excuse. The nanny tucks her into bed, instructing her to be awake before dinner. As she lies in bed, Dorothea turns and discovers a napkin with Theon's inscriptions on it, a reminder of their shared past. Dorothea attempts to concentrate on her reading but finds herself continually distracted by Ray's restless behavior. Annoyed, she sternly asks him to stay still. Ray, excited about his upcoming coronation as the crown prince, explains that his restlessness is due to the anticipation of the big day. He then asks Dorothea for her opinion on his appearance, to which she playfully teases him about looking somewhat foolish and advises him to fix his appearance properly. Raymond surprises Dorothea by expressing a wish for her to become the crown prince instead, citing her confident and bold demeanor. Dorothea shakes her head in disbelief, explaining to Ray that she is unable to summon spirits, a crucial skill for the crown prince. Dorothea observes Ray's ignorance and hopes that, as he embarks on his journey as the crown prince, he will come to understand the impact of his casual words on her. Ray, seeking encouragement, pleads with Dorothea to cheer him up and hug him for good luck at his coronation. However, Dorothea responds with cold words and runs away from him. Their playfulness is interrupted by the royal nanny, informs him that it is time for him to head inside now. As Dorothea observes the hall's decoration, she can't help but notice its simplicity, which is a stark contrast to her past life. In her previous life, the millennia light had always illuminated the empire, but now it appears to be just mediocre. Even the scepter, currently in the emperor's hands, used to contain a soul stone, but it's nowhere to be found at the moment. She attempts to recollect more memories from her past life, but snaps out of it quickly, realizing that dwelling on the past no longer aligns with her new life. Ray steps forward before the emperor and smiles at Dorothea, who hastily signals to him to behave and look forward. However, Ray continues to stare at her, nodding repeatedly. Dorothea finds herself comparing her behavior to Ray's, and briefly entertains the thought that she might have acted better if she were in his position. But she quickly dismisses such thoughts and refocuses on the present. Dorothea harbors hopes that Ray will grow up to become an exceptional emperor, one who leaves a significant mark on the empire's history. The emperor takes Ray around the hall. As Dorothea stands there, some women approach her, showering her with compliments for bearing a striking resemblance to the late queen when she was alive. The emperor dismisses their observations as nonsense, which prompts the women to apologize and turn their attention to the emperor and Ray. Once again, Dorothea feels like she's being treated as though she's invisible, which sours her mood. Unlike her old self, who would draw attention by bragging and pointing out Ray's mistakes as the crown prince, she now remains calm and indifferent to such matters. Raymond calls out to Dorothea, urging her to join in his excitement. She questions his enthusiasm, unable to find anything amusing in the ceremony and simply hoping for it to conclude. Dorothea reminds Ray of her place, emphasizing that she has no right to join him. She ignores his plea and looks for a place to sit instead. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls her attention, and she turns to see that it's Theon who is trying to ask her a question, surprising her with his presence. Theon initiates a conversation with Dorothea, asking if she also finds the party uninteresting. Dorothea wonders why Theon is still at the event, assuming he'd be with Julia. Theon, however, offers her something to drink, as he has observed her from a distance, and noticed she hasn't consumed anything since the event started. Dorothea appreciates the gesture and accepts the drink, even though she has little interest in it. Theon goes on to mention how Ray always speaks highly of Dorothea's brilliance and excellence, particularly in her studies. Dorothea, despite Ray's praise, believes she is not as good as he portrays her to be behind her back. Theon then informs Dorothea about Episteme, the finest academy in the empire, where talents are nurtured and noble families from all over the world connect for various purposes. He mentions that Ray can easily enroll there because he's the crown prince. However, Dorothea reveals that she cannot do anything to surpass the crown prince, recounting an incident from her past life that led to her being locked up for a significant period. She tells Theon that she has given up on her ambitions and won't be joining them at the academy. As Theon attempts to persuade Dorothea, he notices her gaze fixed on the Emperor and Ray, and he quickly grasps the meaning behind her statement about giving up her ambition. Understanding the situation, Theon falls silent, avoiding further embarrassment for both of them. In an attempt to change the subject and avoid any further awkwardness, Dorothea brings up the weather. However, her conversation is abruptly interrupted by Julia, who calls for Theon's attention as he is needed by the Grand Duke. Theon apologizes to Dorothea and leaves with Julia, leaving her alone once more. Feeling like there's nothing left for her to do, Dorothea decides to return to her room. Unfortunately, she spills her drink as she approaches the Emperor, who is with a duke. The Emperor promptly orders Dorothea to apologize to the Duke for her actions. Rey tries to defend her, explaining that the Duke wasn't stained, but Dorothea bows her head humbly in front of the gathered crowd and apologizes to the Duke for her mistakes. The Emperor then instructs his servant to escort the princess back to her room due to her soiled clothes. Dorothea looks behind as she's about to enter and notices Theon with Julie looking at her with shock and disbelief. She hopes the look in Theon's eye will fade as she walks away, but it doesn't. Dorothea sulks in her room, haunted by the memory of the expression Theon left her with. The thought of him being with Julia only deepens her unease, even though she's aware of the slim chance of Theon ever developing feelings for her. She decides that she must do everything in her power to forget about Theon entirely. Rey knocks at Dorothea's door, concerned about her well-being. However, Dorothea angrily yells at him to leave her alone, expressing her desire not to talk to anyone. She orders him to return to the party, emphasizing that it's his place. Rey, on the other hand, refuses to comply, stating that the party is no longer enjoyable to him, and he simply wants to spend time with her. Driven by anger, Dorothea rushes to the door and loudly scolds Rey for his decision to leave the party, reminding him that it's not a choice but a requirement now that he is the crown prince of the Empire. However, as she comes to her senses, she realizes it's too late, as she notices Theon's presence. Dorothea becomes aware of Theon and Julie's presence, and Rey confesses that he had been playing with them and brought them along to check on her. Feeling deeply embarrassed by the encounter, Dorothea rushes inside and hastily shuts the door. Tears well up in her eyes as she contemplates what Theon might think of her now. She doesn't want to be seen as a scary and ferocious person and despises herself even more. In this moment, Dorothea makes a vow to live honestly and sincerely more than anyone else, as she believes it's the only way to atone for the sins of her former life. After the incident with Theon and Julie, Dorothea falls seriously ill, struggling to get out of bed and perform her daily routine due to fever and severe body aches. Her nanny visits repeatedly to care for her and attend to her needs, offering encouragement for a speedy recovery. During her illness, Dorothea notices Rey's absence since their last encounter. He hasn't disturbed or visited her anymore, leading her to believe that he might now hate her for shouting at him and ordering him to leave her sight. Dorothea begins to think that it's better if Rey stays away from her to avoid any annoyance on her part. However, she suddenly notices Rey peering into her room from the door. She questions what he's doing there, and he enters her room with excitement, bearing a gift. Despite Dorothea's initial rejection of the gift, Rey proceeds to show her a basket of fresh tomatoes that he had planted entirely by himself, without any supervision. Dorothea is surprised that Rey had found the time to engage in such activities secretly behind the palace. Rey continues to enthusiastically share details about all the different plants and species he has been cultivating in his garden, expressing his eagerness to offer them to Dorothea for her to taste first. Dorothea observes that the Crown Prince has been spending a considerable amount of time on his garden instead of focusing on his studies. Rey, however, reassures her that he still finds time for his studies. Dorothea takes the opportunity to remind Rey that there are people out there who are willing to risk their lives and give their all to surpass him. She advises him not to waste his time. Rey notices her change in mood and asks if she is upset with him, quickly apologizing and bringing up their previous encounter where he had begged her to play with him, but she declined. In response, Dorothea advises Rey that he won't grow into a good emperor if he continues to behave in the same manner. Rey changes the topic, attempting to persuade Dorothea to try some of his freshly grown tomatoes. He assures her that he will study diligently and become the best student at Episteme. Curious, Rey asks Dorothea why she always stays locked up in the palace when she could be outside playing and enjoying fun activities. Dorothea recalls that in her previous life she had already explored most places, and the idea of repeating those experiences doesn't appeal to her. She prefers staying indoors. Ray tries to persuade her by mentioning an interesting place he heard about from rumors, hoping it will pique her interest and get her to go out with him. After much persuasion, Dorothea reluctantly agrees to go out, but without Ray, leaving him both disappointed and pleased since she will be stepping outside. Her nanny happily dresses Dorothea for her outing and walks her out of the palace. She instructs Dorothea to hold her hand so she won't get lost. Although Dorothea feels shy, she is intrigued by the remarkable view that was once marred by war during her previous life. Later, we see Dorothea awaken from unconsciousness, her face covered and her hands tied. She overhears two men discussing their plans to ransom her from her owners, with one of them making horrible remarks about her background. Confused and clueless, Dorothea tries to make sense of her present predicament. Her mind replays events from days before when she and her nanny were spending time in the market, buying unnecessary items and exploring the area. They were attacked by some men in an alley and Dorothea was abducted, witnessing her nanny being knocked unconscious. She makes a comparison between her former life as an emperor and her current treatment as a captive. Dorothea doesn't want to meet her end at the hands of these men and begins formulating an escape plan. The men argue about the extended delay in receiving the ransom they demanded, and Dorothea realizes she has been unconscious for 10 days, leaving her weak and thirsty. She wonders if her family has given up on rescuing her. As the men notice Dorothea is awake, she pleads with them to remove her blindfold. One of them, Tutu, complies and introduces himself. Dorothea pretends to be nice and innocent, initially asking if he's her new nanny and then quickly switching to calling him her friend and eventually referring to him as Uncle Tutu. Tutu finds her demeanor cute and behaves kindly toward her. Dorothea observes the room and identifies the faces of the men who abducted her. She tries to inquire about their location, but Tutu keeps the details vague. She distracts him by asking about the scar on his face, and he willingly shares the story behind it. Dorothea also mentions her hunger, prompting Tutu to beckon his partner, Danny, to offer her food. However, Danny questions their mission and warns Tutu. Tutu tries to give Dorothea some food, but Danny angrily orders her food to be served on the floor and threatens her with a knife, revealing their intention to kill her due to their disdain for wealthy people like her. Danny walks away from Dorothea and suddenly notices something scary under the table: a scorpion. In fear, both men start jumping around, taking turns to order each other to eliminate the scorpion. Dorothea uses this opportunity to ask for more food, offering to kill the scorpion for them if they release her. Surprisingly, they agree and hand her some sticks. Dorothea calmly picks up the scorpion, and Danny instructs her to throw it out immediately. After disposing of the scorpion, Dorothea exits the room and realizes she's in a basement. Upon reaching the outside, she discovers she's in a desert with nowhere to run, even if she were to escape. Feeling trapped, Dorothea decides to take her time crafting an escape plan as she attempts to determine the direction to her village. She desperately looks for a ray of hope or anything to keep her going, but finds none. Danny and Tutu keep their agreement to feed Dorothea, and she secretly hopes another scorpion will appear, giving her a reason to request more food. Suddenly, Tutu informs Danny of the news regarding the princess's disappearance in the city. Both men turn to look at Dorothea, who realizes they've gone somewhere privately to discuss her situation. Dorothea blames the Empire for making such an announcement, as her life is already in danger. Growing impatient, Dorothea exits the room and finds a dagger in a bag. She makes her way toward the door and eavesdrops on Danny and Tutu's conversation as they plan to kill and dispose of her. Tutu tries to persuade Danny not to kill her, emphasizing that she's just a little girl, but Danny reminds him that they'll face severe consequences if the palace discovers their involvement in her abduction. He orders Tutu to prepare 2 camels while he deals with Dorothea. Realizing she has no other choice, Dorothea decides to use the dagger to survive. When Danny exits the room and can't find her, Dorothea attacks him from behind, attempting to stab him. However, she only manages to bruise his skin, and Danny retaliates by strangling her against the wall. Weak and small, Dorothea struggles to fight back and can only hope for an opportunity to strike. Danny angrily instructs Dorothea to stay still, believing she can't harm him. Those words trigger a deep anger within her, and she recalls all the people who have hurt her without consequence. Summoning all her strength, she strikes Danny, causing him to fall to the floor. She seizes the chance to stab him in the leg, causing a deeper wound. Danny calls for help, but no one responds. He notices a cruel look on Dorothea's face, which seems familiar to him. Dorothea regains her senses and pleads with Danny to let her go peacefully, expressing her desire to survive and live quietly, even if it means dying in the desert. She steps out into the desert, walking aimlessly with no destination in mind. She wishes for light to appear in the darkening desert and attempts to use the spirit of light to create a path, but fails. Dorothea wonders if the palace would have reacted the same way if it had been Prince Ray who was abducted instead. Eventually, she passes out while lost in thought. When she awakens, she notices light and hears the sound of horses approaching. Dorothea feels relieved as help has come for her, interpreting it as a second chance at life despite her past actions. Men arrive and call out to her, discovering her in the desert. Dorothea awakens in the palace, saved by one of the imperial knights, but she can't bring herself to feel happy about it. She overhears her father, the emperor, ordering severe punishment for all those involved in her abduction, from the abductors to those spreading rumors. She can't help but feel a deep sadness, blaming herself for the recent events and the consequences of her past actions as a tyrant. A royal doctor visits Dorothea to assess her health and provides a report. He informs her and the new nanny, who is now attending to her, of her slow recovery and ongoing symptoms of fever. The change in Nanny tugs at Dorothea's heart, and she pities her previous nanny who was innocent in the whole affair. The doctor suggests that Dorothea should move to a different location for her recuperation, possibly a vacation spot, which caught Dorothea's attention. She sees this as an opportunity to get away from the palace and everyone there. Dorothea contemplates her mission during this vacation, hoping it will involve protecting someone rather than becoming a tyrant again. After careful consideration, Dorothea voices her decision to go on vacation. The nanny expresses concern about her going alone to a faraway place. Ray visits his sister with flowers and is relieved to see her recovering. He inquires about their discussion, and the nanny informs him of Dorothea's plan to go on vacation. Ray tries to convince her to stay and continue her studies at Episteme, but Dorothea firmly asserts her decision. Ray, feeling disappointed and responsible for her abduction, walks away. The nanny cautions Dorothea about her behavior towards Ray. Dorothea prepares for her vacation, still finding it hard to believe that her father has agreed to let her leave the palace, and grateful that her father's lack of interest finally proved useful, as it allowed her the freedom to embark on a vacation away from the palace. Theon visits Dorothea, having heard about her departure. She shares the details of her travel plans, and Theon surprises her with a gift. He gives her some sweets, which could be helpful in case of motion sickness during her journey. Theon expresses his anticipation of her return to the Empire and hopes to see her again soon, as he didn't expect her to leave the palace so suddenly and for such a distant place. Then Dorothea arrives at the mansion, savoring the beautiful surroundings that offer her a fresh start. Clara, the mansion's maid, greets her and informs her that she wants to introduce someone. Dorothea's eyes widened with shock and disbelief after she sees Stefan Greenwall, a name from her previous life. Stefan, once her victim, now stands before her, and Dorothea feels a deep sense of shame. Stefan reappears, peeks at Dorothea's list of obedient experiences, and Clara playfully calls her cute. This irritates Dorothea, who doesn't feel the word fits her personality. Clara inquires about Dorothea's sudden interest in making a list, and Dorothea explains her desire to live obediently. Clara suggests adding a smiley face to the list, reminding Dorothea of Ray's beautiful smile, which she agrees to include. When Dorothea attempts to smile, she finds herself struggling, and to avoid embarrassment, she sends Stefan and Clara away, claiming she needs some alone time. As she resumes her list, Dorothea adds tasks such as not coveting others' possessions, reminding herself that the throne belongs to Ray, not interfering in Julia and Theon's relationship, and even saving lives and amassing wealth to help others. Pleased with her list, she gazes at it contentedly, then heads to the balcony to enjoy the view of the beach. Dorothea expresses her desire to visit the beach to Stefan, and after changing into beach attire, she heads there with him, following quietly. Lost in the peaceful atmosphere, she notices a figure in the distance and approaches it, stumbling upon Eden Bronte, her once trusted and handsome but dangerous aide from her previous life. A flashback reveals Eden's role in Dorothea's previous life. He was known and adored for his handsome appearance and smooth words, winning the favor of everyone around him. Despite Dorothea's tyrannical rule, Eden remained loyal to her, attending to her every need and presenting her with gifts tailored to her preferences. He also played a significant role in carrying out her orders, which often included eliminating those she despised, such as Ray and Julia. Dorothea, blinded by her power, failed to realize that Eden's loyalty was tainted by his love for her. It wasn't until near the time of her execution that she uncovered the truth. Despite her discovery, Eden was forgiven by everyone around him, and their support propelled him to become the emperor after her demise. Dorothea is taken aback by the sight of tears streaming down Eden's face, a side of him she hadn't expected to see. It challenges her perception of him and makes her wonder about the cause of his emotional display. As she leans forward to inquire, Eden looks at her in shock before hastily retreating, leaving her with unanswered questions. Recalling Eden's background, Dorothea realizes that he is the illegitimate child of the Bronte family, born out of wedlock and hidden away due to his illegitimacy. This revelation adds complexity to her understanding of Eden's tears, as she contemplates whether his tears could be linked to his own troubled past, much like her own. After the report of so many incoming letters in the mansion relating to Dorothea's sudden arrival in the palace, she decides to go out and visit them to end the letters. Dorothea becomes overwhelmed by the crowd of ladies who are eager to meet her and offer their opinions about her appearance. Their remarks, including one commenting on her being skinny, make her uncomfortable. In her desperation to escape this overwhelming attention, Dorothea discreetly signals to Stefan and Clara to rescue her from the gathering. Amidst the commotion, Dorothea hears a soft and subtle voice extending an invitation for her to visit a house. When she turns to identify the speaker, she recognizes it as Duchess Bronte, and without hesitation, she accepts the invitation, viewing it as a potential opportunity for Eden's redemption or atonement, and she should add it to her decent living goals. Dorothea reflects on her previous outing with the ladies and how their warm reception contrasted with her uneasy departure. She contemplates her difficulties in giving and receiving affection, believing that her past actions have made her ill-suited for such interactions in her new life. Days later, she arrives at the Bronte Palace, where the Duke and Duchess welcome her warmly and lead her to the dining area. Dorothea is puzzled by the abundance of food but the absence of Eden. As they apologize for their delayed welcome, they inquire if Dorothea is comfortable living alone. She interrupts them, asking for their son. They assume that she is talking about Jonadon, and informs her that he is studying at Episteme. She corrects them and lets them know she is talking about Eden Bronte. The Duke and Duchess are taken aback, and their shocked expressions reflect their surprise at her sudden insistence on seeing Eden. Dorothea continues to request for Eden's presence, which leaves them no choice but to stop the pretense. The Duke and Duchess inquire from Dorothea about her meeting with Eden. They both misunderstand Dorothea's intentions for love, and she reluctantly plays along. They immediately attribute his absence to a sudden illness. She requests to meet him and wonders if she can be friends with him. The Duke agrees and tells her Eden will be amused to see her. The maid escorts Dorothea after meal to meet with Eden. Dorothea meets Eden in the garden, and as he acknowledges her arrival, he bows and greets her and says it's their first time meeting. She orders Stefan to give her privacy so she can talk with Eden. Dorothea tries to gauge Eden's response to see if he remembers the beach incident, or if he's avoiding the topic to prevent an awkward atmosphere between them. Eden inquires about Dorothea's recovery progress since changing her location. Dorothea, keen on understanding Eden better, begins to notice a pattern in his behavior. She observes that Eden twitches his eye when he lies or pretends, leading her to realize that he has been pretending to her since they met. She also observes his shy demeanor, which doesn't align with the confident man she knew in her previous life. Eden opens up to Dorothea about his lack of friends or companions, revealing that his brother disapproves of him going out because nothing good ever comes from his attempts to socialize. As he talks, Eden starts to feel that he's sharing too much and changes the topic. Dorothea wonders if she can successfully befriend Eden and help him lead a different life from his previous one. She invites him to the Anasta Palace to spend time together, but only if he finds it convenient. Eden is overjoyed and rushes to Dorothea, surprising her with a kiss on the cheek. This unexpected behavior makes Dorothea question the differences between the two versions of Eden and whether she has become too reliant on her knowledge from her previous life. Dorothea is tempted to make some changes to her list, but cautions herself to have patience and continue in her observation. Back at the mansion, Clara meets with Stefan as she informs him about Dorothea's birthday, which is fast approaching. She asks him to assist her in preparing something for the princess, but he only stares at her, leaving her with no response. Clara discovers that Stefan already has in store something special for the princess, leaving her who's yet to think of the perfect idea for a birthday gift. Clara continues to rant about being stuck on choosing a gift for Dorothea to Stefan, as she goes on to list different things the princess doesn't like which normal girls should be crazy about. Then the idea of giving her a book instead crosses her mind as Dorothea is obsessed with reading books and pauses to whisper a few words to Stefan. He hesitates to remind her that Dorothea is still little, but she shrugs off his opinion, saying if Price Ray liked her idea of a gift when he was about Dorothea's age, Dorothea shouldn't also find anything wrong in the surprise she is about to plan. Clara arranges a table with a variety of dishes and wishes Dorothea a happy birthday. The delicious food excites Dorothea, and she can't help but drool at the sight of it all. Clara proposes taking a walk on the beach later, as the weather is beautiful. Although Dorothea initially appears indifferent, Clara manages to persuade her to visit the beach. Dorothea notices Stefan's absence and becomes curious about what he and Clara might be doing in secret. While she's out enjoying the beach, Clara draws her attention to a beautiful shell lying on the sand. Dorothea is unsure if Clara is hinting at something or just making casual conversation. She begins to suspect that Clara might have hidden her birthday gift under one of the shells. Dorothea starts picking up shells one by one, searching for her gift. She looks around but can't find Clara, only a blurry figure in the distance. Suddenly, someone in a lion costume approaches her, and she quickly realizes it's Stefan in disguise. The man in the lion costume introduces himself as Warrior Leo to Dorothea. She recognizes the name Leo from the cover of her favorite book, which makes Stefan the character from the book. Despite realizing the ruse, Dorothea decides to play along and not spoil the fun. She hands all the shells she collected to Leo and asks him to stuff them in his pockets, mentioning how Clara enjoys attaching pockets to all kinds of clothing. Leo wishes Dorothea a happy birthday, and she feels a bit embarrassed, but decides to enjoy the moment and appreciate the effort. Unexpectedly, Leo lifts Dorothea in his arms. She reflects on the surprising turn of events, realizing that she never expected to be hugged by a knight like Stefan, whom she had once mocked for wanting to die alone and for taking Ray's side. She acknowledges Stefan's background and unfriendly nature, but commends him for always staying true to his path and not letting his background hinder his responsibilities. Dorothea sees a similarity between them in not being born as crown princes, with the only difference being that Stefan has chosen to walk his path with determination. Stefan reminds Dorothea once again that he's a lion, not a man, as she had mistakenly referred to him as such. A sudden heavy downpour starts, prompting Stefan to swiftly carry Dorothea back to the mansion to shield her from getting wet. Leo the lion bids her farewell and walks away, still in costume. Dorothea realizes that he deliberately chose not to reveal his true identity in her presence. After reaching her room and drying her wet hair, Dorothea finds a letter waiting for her. Clara informs her that the letter arrived from the palace and is from His Highness Raymond. Dorothea casually tosses the letter aside, declaring that she will deal with it later. Clara then announces Stefan's arrival, and both of them believe they have successfully fooled Dorothea with their disguise. Dorothea, who now wants to play along, informs him that she met the lion Leo outside and then complains that he didn't prepare a gift for her, leaving Stefan clueless, and he doesn't know now what to do. He gets on his knees and promises that he will give her one next time, but she is adamant on receiving one, and demands that he teaches her swordsmanship. A few days later, and in a sunny field, Princess Dorothea practices her swordsmanship without Stefan's guidance. She observes that her weapon has become easier to handle as her body is getting lighter, wondering when Stefan will finally give her an actual sword to practice with instead of sticks. Dorothea suddenly senses someone's presence with the thought that it belongs to Stefan and immediately attacks Eden instead. She immediately apologizes for her mistake. Eden commends her for her progress with the sword as he compares himself, who's bad at swordsmanship. Dorothea remembers that there had never been a time where she witnessed Eden ever using a sword. Dorothea informs him of her being outside to exercise, which is the reason for her being all sweaty and dirty. Eden yet again uses his sweet mouth as he turns her statement into a compliment. The maids from a distance make noises as they observe Dorothea and Eden looking admirable together. Dorothea interrogates Eden for his reason for the sudden visit, and he reminds her of their last meeting where she willingly invited him over to the mansion to play whenever he feels bored. Eden teases Dorothea about going with her to the bathroom for her to freshen up, which makes Dorothea nervous. He quickly informs her that he is only joking and would wait in the living room while she uses the bathroom. Dorothea found herself touring different rooms in the mansion with Eden. They began in her own room, which struck her as simple and lacking the excessive decoration she used to indulge in during her previous life. She couldn't help but recall the extravagance of her past room, now realizing how empty and futile it had all been, which left her with a touch of sadness. Eden, ever the charmer, tried to lift the mood by presenting Dorothea with a gift as a token of his appreciation for her invitation. He revealed an expensive and dazzling necklace, but Dorothea promptly declined it. She felt it was too soon for him to be giving her gifts and suggested that he give it to someone he considered truly special and dear to him. Eden felt a tinge of disappointment at the rejection but brushed it off, attributing it to his own excitement. He informed her that he would be joining her to resume her training, as he had some free time. However, Eden noticed the letter that had arrived from the royal house. Dorothea dismissed the topic, saying it didn't matter, and asked Eden to leave her room. Eden, on his way out, notices a peculiar handkerchief and curiously inquires about it. Dorothea, realizing that it belongs to Theon, hastily rushes to stop him from opening it, claiming it's something personal. Eden, undeterred, playfully suggests that he'll bring his own handkerchief next time he visits, since she seems to like them. Dorothea agrees with his idea, brightening his spirits even more, and they decide to continue their tour. As they stroll through the mansion, Eden suggests heading to her dressing room. Meanwhile, the maids inquire about Dorothea's thoughts on returning to the palace. Dorothea hesitates, deeming it too sudden. But Clara reminds her of the recent news regarding an epidemic plaguing the city, with those who contract the disease often succumbing to it. Dorothea, filled with empathy, decides to amend her goal list to include providing medicine and resources to address the public health crisis. After a short while, Dorothea receives word of the success of her efforts, as the epidemic begins to significantly subside. 3 years have elapsed, and during this time, Dorothea has remained at the mansion, dedicating herself to mastering swordsmanship without returning to the palace. Frustration boils within her as she practices with Stefan, using all her methods to attempt to strike him but continuously failing. In a moment of distraction, as Clara calls out to encourage her, Dorothea tries to seize the opportunity to strike Stefan, but he effortlessly blocks her attack and steps away. Dorothea's frustration rises as she yells at him for treating her like a weakling. Raymond stares at his letter, deep in thought about Dorothea's continued silence even in response to his letters. Theon tries to comfort Ray, suggesting that she might have read his letters but been too busy to reply. Ray, frustrated by the strictness of episteme, laments the difficulty of meeting with his sister. Theon proposes the idea of paying Dorothea a visit at the mansion during their upcoming holiday, which excites Ray, and he eagerly looks forward to seeing his beloved sister. Meanwhile, Dorothea questions Stefan about when she will finally get to practice with a real sword, but is interrupted by Clara's scolding. Clara chastises them for being late as lunchtime has already passed. She scolds Stefan for injuring himself with a thorn while handling the sword. Clara then instructs Dorothea to freshen up. During their conversation, Clara mentions the constant deliveries of food that have been arriving at their doorstep, even after the epidemic had ended years ago. They still haven't discovered who is behind this gesture of generosity. Dorothea glances out of her window and notices a mysterious boy wearing a hat. He quickly flees from the compound, and she sighs, wishing she could invite him over for dinner as a way of showing her appreciation. Clara informs Dorothea about the arrival of another letter from the Empire, and Dorothea inquires about the source. Clara reveals that the letters are from Ray, who has sent 2 separate letters. Dorothea decides not to read them and notices that one of the letters doesn't belong to her. It's addressed to Stefan and came from the Knights. When Stefan arrives, both Clara and Dorothea stand curiously, assuming the content of the letter must be significant, as it's the first time Stefan has received a letter. Stefan informs them that the letter contains an invitation to participate in an up-ranking test that could potentially elevate him to a higher-ranking knight. Dorothea requests to read the contents of the letter herself and realizes that Stefan should already be making preparations to leave for the test in order to arrive on time. However, what intrigues her even more is Stefan's decision to participate in the test, as it implies that the royal family is no longer supporting the idea of the knight protecting the princess. Dorothea tells them that the mansion is very safe, and she's been getting better at using a sword. She says she can protect herself now, but this news about Stefan getting promoted worries her. She didn't think he'd be promoted because she hasn't always been on good terms with the other knights. Dorothea then says she wants to throw a goodbye party for Stefan to thank him for protecting her. Stefan doesn't say anything. He just looks at her. Eventually, Stefan says he's her guardian knight, and he'd rather keep protecting her than get a promotion. Dorothea steps out with Stefan in the market to ensure that no one is in need of her help, but is surprised to see so many people out there. She notices a crowd nearby, and within it, people are gathered around something written, but they seem to be struggling to read it. It catches her attention, and she makes her move towards the crowd, but is suddenly picked up by Stefan, who still thinks of her as a clueless child. This annoys her. She then looks at the report and sees that the amateur sword fighting tournament is being held this year, and you can register starting today till the day after tomorrow at the booth located in the plaza. The tournament will be categorized by different age groups, and the award is. They wonder if the notice was not about the festival after all, and with an award this big people will... Stefan looks at the pouting Dorothea, and she tells him that it's a sword-fighting tournament and asks him to go and register. They then go inside and ask to get their tickets for the sword-fighting tournament. The person in charge looks at Stefan and sees that Stefan does not really look like an amateur, and then looks at Dorothea and comments that a kid like her should grow up a little before coming here. She replies back that she is old enough to come, as the rule says that anyone older than 10 can come. This angers the person in charge, and he taunts her for talking back to the elder and says if her father taught her to behave that way. She asks him what did he said, and he goes to say that with her attitude, her parents must have had a hard time raising her, as she's a troublesome brat. All of a sudden, Stefan leaps toward him and then instructs him to follow the rules with an angry look. The person in charge gets intimidated by Stefan and fulfills their order quickly. Dorothea offers her gratitude to Stefan and acknowledges that because of him she was able to register successfully. They plan to go home but come across 2 brothers. One of the brothers is compelling the other to carry all the heavy items solo while instructing him to hasten. The brother also orders him to call him a master as he refuses to accept him as his brother. Dorothea believes she should intervene to help. All of a sudden, his hands slip, and everything falls from his grasp onto the ground. The brother starts cursing him. To Dorothea's shock, it's Ethan who is being bullied by his brother. In that very moment, Ethan receives a forceful slap from his brother, admonishing him for having spoiled the gift intended for their mother. When Eden extends his hand to reach for the shattered pieces, it pierces in his skin, causing him to cry out in agony. His brother raises his hand to hit him, but just in time, Dorothea intervenes and commands him to stop, and Stefan grabs his hand from behind. He asks her what she is doing, and she replies that he is asking her of her good deeds of the day. She extends her hand to Eden, who, deeply impressed by her, gently clasps her hand. Jonathan, unaware of the fact that she is the princess, calls her a brat and cautions her about his identity, but she reminds him that he does not know who she is either, and that ignorance can sometimes be the cause of downfall, and she is going to overlook it this time because she is being nice. Dorothea approaches Eden, who stands frozen in disbelief, resembling a statue. She firmly takes his hand and leads him away. Eden wonders if Her Highness had been concerned about him, while Dorothea expresses her gratitude to Stefan for his assistance. Meanwhile, Ethan drifts into contemplation, reveling in the fact that Dorothea had held his hand. As she prepares to depart, she glances back and observes Eden still rooted in the same spot. She extends her hand to his swollen cheek, filled with concern, but Eden reassures her that such occurrences are commonplace for him. This revelation startles Dorothea, as she believes that Eden should possess the capability to manage such issues effortlessly. However, she contemplates that his youth might be a possible factor. Eden confides in her, explaining that the young master has harbored resentment toward him since his birth out of wedlock. Dorothea presumes that the young master he refers to is Jonathan Bronte. Eden humbly appeals to Dorothea, requesting if he can take refuge with her until the young master's anger subsides. In that moment, a thought strikes Dorothea. Eden is undeniably handsome. After a brief pause, she agrees that he can stay at the villa for the time period. When she returns to the palace, to her astonishment, Ray is present, and he embraces her tightly. He explains that he received a break from Episteme, which is why he obtained permission to visit. To her further shock, Theon is accompanying him. Dorothea is taken aback and inquires about Theon's presence. Ray responds that he brought Theon along so they could all spend time together. In an impulsive gesture, she seizes Ray's hand and leads him into a nearby room. She questions his motives for coming here. Ray reveals that he came because he wanted to see her. Dorothea's anger flares as she demands to know if he wants to see her and find out what she's doing in this remote location. She presses him about bringing Theon, causing her to become furious. Ray defends himself, stating that they are already acquainted, and he invited Theon to the villa because he expressed a desire to come. Dorothea, in her frustration, confronts him about disregarding her consent and perspective. Ray explains that he only wanted to bring joy to Dorothea's life and provide her with a surprise. She erupts, declaring that this is not a surprise, but a disaster, and insists that he return home immediately. Overwhelmed, Ray begins to cry, revealing that he came to check on her because she never responded to his messages. Dorothea reflects on how she has become the villain by making someone cry and decides that staying here will only exacerbate her anger. She exits the room only to find Theon standing by the door, his concern evident as he observes her pale face determined to show Theon her best self. She starts running. Theon catches up with her and unexpectedly takes her hand, asking her to wait. She wonders why, of all times, she's longed for Theon to hold her hand like this. The desire to turn around and look at him wells up within her, but she restrains herself, feeling she lacks the right to do so. Theon requests a moment, apologizing sincerely for his sudden arrival, admitting they should have sent word ahead, but decisions were made at the last minute. He acknowledges her likely discomfort with someone outside the imperial family joining them. Dorothea reassures him that it's not the issue, and he explains that he came to see her again, expressing his worry when she left last time. Dorothea turns to face him and inquires about what that face means, referring to his earlier question. She wonders if it's not something pleasant. He addresses her as Your Highness, drops to his knees, and earnestly expresses his desire to get along with her. Memories resurface of her past, when she pleaded with him not to leave, yearning for a harmonious relationship. She realizes these are the very words she repeated countless times to him. Suddenly, Eden interrupts, inquiring if there are any medicines available for his aching cheeks. Dorothea releases Theon's hand, apologizes, and informs him that Eden is her guest whom she has neglected. She leaves with Eden, promising to search for ointment and thinking herself a fool for running from Theon's desire for companionship. Eden mentions he may not really need medicine. His cheeks are just slightly swollen. Dorothea asks why he requested it, to which he responds, suggesting she needs it more due to her appearance of discomfort and a slight fever. She denies any pain and implies he should have picked up on the hint. Eden sympathetically acknowledges her efforts to recuperate and offers to assist her in overcoming her illness. He leans in and whispers that he genuinely likes her for a moment. Dorothea is taken aback, but dismisses it as a blatant lie, urging him to stop teasing her. Eden notes her lack of laughter as a sign of her pain. Dorothea asks him to leave, and he questions her well-being. She insists she's fine and suggests he take his leave. As he departs, she informs him that if he wishes to return home, he can ask Clara to arrange a carriage. Eden then encounters Theon passing by, introduces himself as Ethan Bronte from Duke Bronte's family, and apologizes for the late greeting. He inquires if Theon found the ointment, and Theon confirms that Her Highness personally applied it. Eden asks for Theon's name, and Theon introduces himself as Theon Freed. Eden expresses his admiration for the Fried family, considering it an honor to make Theon's acquaintance. Theon reveals that he only wants to see the princess. Eden suddenly grasps Theon's hand and advises him that it's not an ideal time to meet her. He explains that she wants to rest quietly, likely tired from swordsmanship training and their trip to the village earlier. Theon asks if they are close, and Eden jokingly replies that they are just close enough to apply ointment to each other's wounds.